Hi, my name is Max. I am the art director working on Battle Planet Judgement Day.
I'm Henning. I'm a programmer for the project, and we wanted to take the chance to talk about some of the cool technical aspects of the game.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, have you played the game before? You know what to do?
I've played the game before. I'm horrible at it, despite the fact that I'm working on it as a developer. But I'll be playing for now. Meanwhile, Henning can talk about some of the technical aspects of the game, based on what you're seeing on the screen right now.
Exactly. The cool thing about Battle Planet is that we have a totally unique render pipeline. Basically, the entire lighting system of the game had to be custom built so that it would work on a spherical level.
So, Unity, the engine we are working with, didn't have a system we could use that would have worked for a round planet like this, because this is kind of a unique case, what we're doing here in Battle Planet.
No, we couldn't find an engine that had out-of-the-box systems that would have worked, specifically for a spherical game like this one. So we had to build most of it ourselves. For instance, we had to customize the physics and the way that enemies work because, well, we do have gravity and things falling down, but we don't want enemies to fall off the sphere. That's one thing. We also had to come up with our own lighting because if we would use a normal light source, one half of the planet would always be dark because that's the theoretically correct way of doing it. In the beginning we had plans like that and we kind of liked it, but we realised after a while that it just never quite looks right. And especially in a split-screen game where you might have players on different sides of the planet but don't want them in the shadows, normal lighting just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and during development, I think you told me that it's not very easy to calculate things on a spherical planet like this one.
That's right. We initially had the idea that we would build the level as a plane and then take this sphere and basically wrap the plane around the sphere. But we figured out that this is much, much harder to do than we initially thought, and that we really need to build our levels and the entire game based on this sphere. And, you know, a lot of the visual tricks that people use don't work in this case because you can't take a square and wrap it around a sphere without some part of it ending up massively distorted. That's another reason why we had to build a lot of the stuff ourselves and come up with some new and exciting solutions.
Can you tell me again, when you look at the planet right now, why does it look sort of blue around the edges and then gets brighter when you reach the centre? For us, as artists working on the project, that's something we can manually pick, the colour of the lighting, something we can edit fairly easily.
Exactly, that's another one of the cool things about the project. The level in and of itself, let me switch it off for a second, doesn't have any colour. It's just grey. But we have this lighting texture which is basically running underneath the rest of the game, and that's something that you can just edit in Photoshop. So I know you guys came up with all sorts of textures and experimented by going, let me make a sphere that's blue around the edges, that's a bit darker, and then has this bright green around the centre. Is that green? I don't know colours.
That's green, yeah.
Right, so that's just something that you can draw by hand any way you like, because we have this system where we bend it around the planet, so to speak. The good thing about this is that it has nothing at all to do with how light actually works. It doesn't have to behave the way it normally does. It's just about, wouldn't it be nice if the edges looked a little more blue? And then you can add that in. And in the end, it gives us this cool, handcrafted look that is very unique.
And on top of that, it also gives us the option to colour in the objects in the background, like those planets you see on the right side of the screen, by using the same texture.
Yeah, we essentially have this small area around the edge of the screen that determines the colour of those planets in the background. But as you can see here, they are also just grey to begin with. Yeah. And the cool thing is, we end up with this low-resolution texture that we kind of wrap around the planet and on top of everything, and that more or less determines the entire lighting of the game. A good example of this, if we look at the texture again, you can see how certain gameplay elements like shots and like those jump pads, etc., add smaller dots to the texture. That is basically how we do local light sources. If you could shoot for a second, you can see how the shots from the player and other things like the jetpack add to this layer. And the great thing about that is that all of these lights are very, very cheap to render because it isn't a real light source, it's actually just a small object that we add to the texture.
Yes.
And it just gives us a very cool look. You can tell from the jump pads, for instance, it's kind of hard to see how they're lighting up the environment. But if we turn it off, you can see that they're just sitting there.
Yeah, that automatically makes everything look really flat.
Right. And it also helps with scene integration. The objects in the environment look like they're part of the environment because the jump pad has this green glow and the ground around it also has this green glow. It feels like they're connected.
Like a part of the environment, that's true.
Yeah.
Another part of it is that, of course, we also have shadows. You can see from the enemies there that it looks like we use two different shadow systems in combination. Could you talk about that for a second?
Sure, that's another kind of funny thing. On the whole, shadows in this game were difficult. Like, if we had a light source on the front, then all the enemies would cast really long shadows towards the back.
Yeah.
Because they would wrap around the sphere. That's something we played around with in the beginning, but it never quite looked right. That's why we had to build our own small shadow system so that no matter where you are on the sphere, your shadow is always directly underneath you. You can see it on those enemies with the jetpacks or with that drone. But in addition to that first shadow, which is based on the actual shape of the character, we also have this little dark blob, a kind of blurry shadow. I think you requested that feature, actually, because it kind of helps us give the impression of an indirect light source.
Yeah.
Right. That's...
Okay, so here we have a snow planet, but not just a snow planet. No, wait, it's just a snow planet.
Purely a snow planet, yeah.
So here we have a snow planet.
That's another bit of tech that we developed. We wanted our planets to have a bit more variety and to look differently, and that's why we can spawn certain biomes on the planet. In this case, the planet is fully covered in snow, but planets can also be covered in different biomes, and those biomes can change over time. So we might have a planet where the snow spreads out over time and stuff like that. The cool thing about our biomes is that they work in real time and they change based on what's happening in the game. When you blow up a mine, for instance, if you could show that off, it blows away the snow too. So the environment changes over time. A lot of the enemies change the environment as well, or they leave tracks. And the longer you play, the more blood is left on the planet, and the more snow or water is destroyed in combat.
Right. Does this also work with the tech planet, or the grass planet we saw before?
Yeah. So, another thing that I wanted to mention is that every level of the game is fully destructible. I can show that off by using a small cheat that...
Well played.
I can show that off by using a small cheat. Anywhere on the map, craters like these can spawn based on gameplay events, and these can actually destroy entire sections of the map. So all these mountains and obstacles that you see here can be destroyed with bombs or by certain enemies in the game later on.
And of course, that reduces the amount of terrain that you can run around on, until the whole planet blows up in the end.
Yeah, the more you play, the worse it gets. That's another thing that we added to the game very early on and that we always considered very, very important, that the planet takes damage during the course of the game, until you end up in a situation like this, where there's almost nothing left of the planet and you can barely move. On the top left, you can actually see the bar for planet stability. We can wait a little bit and see what happens when it reaches 0. So the idea right now is to defuse these bombs before they go off. But if you don't manage to do that, then...
This happens.
Yeah, so the level really is fully destructible.
Very nice.
That brings us to the end of this rough overview.
Right. Thank you for walking us through the technical aspects behind Battle Planet.
If you have any questions about the game or about these techniques that we used during the development, leave a comment below, or you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Discord, and all those platforms.
If you want, you can add us to your Steam wishlist. We're always really happy when people like the game enough to add it there.
And we're looking forward to the upcoming release.
We hope you'll have a lot of fun playing Battle Planet Judgment Day. What was the other thing I was supposed to say?
Battle Planet Judgment Day.